Hi guys, welcome to this tutorial. Today I'm going to be looking, lots of you have asked for this, so I'm looking at a Romeo and Juliet style question, looking at an exam style extract, planning for that, and then showing you the first half of a kind of grade 9 quality response to it. So I'm looking at this very famous scene today from Act 1 Scene 5, Romeo and Juliet meeting for the first time, and I'm going to focus the question just because having a look I feel like we do a Romeo question, so looking at the extent to which Shakespeare presents Romeo as a romantic character. I think that's a nice open sort of question, gives us opportunities to perhaps look at ways in which that's not always the case, you know, looking at some of his aggression, his violence, not just in killing Tybalt but killing, you know, characters like Paris at the end, who seems to be out of sync with his very sensitive character that we see the majority of the play. Okay, so with this really famous extract then, looking here at some of the examples, and clearly lots of this fits in with this idea of him being a romantic hero, this idea of him feeling unworthy, you know, he offers the unworthiest hand, and you've got that, if you're thinking about methods here, you've got this as a superlative adjective. He thinks he is, you know, completely unworthy of a woman like Juliet. And then in the metaphor he uses about her, he talks about this holy shrine, and that metaphor, you know, really conveys the sense to which he finds Juliet to be this sort of sacred, chaste, pious, idealized woman. Something that we've seen previously from him in his descriptions of Rosalind, but you know, this religious imagery, this religious semantic field, which sort of permeates this extract, is romantic really, because it's this idea really of him idealizing Juliet, even though he's yet to know her on a more meaningful level. And so we can draw attention to lots of these references to saints and holy palmers. There's lots of images to do with prayer within this extract. And so I think we can look at these, grouping them collectively in this idea of he fits the romantic hero because he sees or he perceives Juliet to be this beyond perfect, almost heavenly woman, which is at best deluded, and you know, which at worst is this spontaneous, slightly reckless behaviour that we see from him at points. And you know, this idea of him, he doesn't want to waste this opportunity, let lips do what hands do. You know, you've studied this play, the context of the, you know, the much more chaste idea of touching, not being overly intimate, using hands, but he is keen to have the opportunity to kiss this ideal woman that he's just met. And you know, here we go when he talks about, finally, then move not while my prize effect I take, thus from my lips by yours my sin is purged. This highly romantic idea that an idealized woman can purify a man, that she has this sort of power to sort of take from him sins, and it gives Juliet this sort of goddess sort of power in his eyes, that she has this ability to take from him any of his sins. And you know, moving on, he's keen for more, isn't he? Give me my sin again, and that's more imperative if you think about this structurally. I think Juliet's response, I'm sure you'll have done things with this with your teachers, but you kissed by the book. At this point, he's potentially holding back a bit. He's not kind of fully immersing himself in the passion he possibly feels, and she's sort of gently teasing him that he seems to have studied kissing without necessarily having the real sort of intimate passion to go with this. So there's lots of structural things in this around how it takes much of the kind of sonnet style form in terms of rhyme scheme and things. I'm not going to sort of belabor that point here, but clearly there would be a number of things that you mention structurally. Okay, so in terms of thinking about the rest of the play, I like to think about this, about my planning for this, as always thinking about what examples can I find from the beginning, middle, and end to structure my ideas. Well, some of the first things that I might want to mention is that in Act 1, Scene 1, the first sort of descriptions we have around Romeo are very much around his sensitivity, and I find it always quite interesting that he's really juxtaposed with Tybalt, who is described as, I believe it's fiery, and so we see him set up as a kind of alternate vision of masculinity. Equally, when his mother's talking about him, she cites his tears, his deep sighs. We know that he kind of locks out the daylight, so he's very sort of secluded and keeping to himself, because as it materialises he's lovesick, but it's a different vision to the kind of toxic masculinity we've seen of the fighting men, the brawling men at the start of the play. When he's talking with his friends and you know, is talking around Rosalind, he talks about the idea of, he mentions the idea that there's no such sight to be shown, the idea of being cheered up, and he believes that there's nothing for him, which is ironic because as soon as he's at the party, he clearly meets Juliet and falls deeply in love. And then obviously in Act 1 Scene 5, just prior to this scene in fact, when he first sees her, we have the very famous Did My Heart Love Till Now, which is obviously works really well for this question, this idea of real sort of romance that he has. And then obviously we've got the extract that we can talk about. So the beginning being kind of our Act 1 and 2, 3, 4 and 5, but I'm also thinking when his friends are teasing him in Act 2 Scene 2, and he talks about he says something about he jests at scars that never felt a wound. You know, so he kind of views himself as different to his friends. You know, he feels he's been picked on because they don't understand what that kind of love is like. And even then when, you know, in those kind of famous balcony scenes where he basically states that he will be prepared to abandon his name, his identity, his family, and he tells her, I never will be Romeo. He will rid himself of that. So yeah, important stuff here. Actually, I'm just thinking, after this, when he goes to see Friar Lawrence, I mean, I'll have to stick it up here, but I think it's quite important because Friar Lawrence talks to him about Rosalind, and he says, I have forgot that name. And I think we've got some evidence there about how inconsistent he is and inconstant he is. The idea that, you know, this woman that he was obsessed with is now completely forgotten. Kind of moving into Act 3, when he thinks about, you know, what Tybalt's done, he kind of concludes, Juliet, thy beauty hath made me effeminate, which I always find a really interesting kind of remark, because it's almost like he blames her for his lack of kind of violent anger, stereotypically masculine behaviour, not particularly kind of, I don't know, romantic in my eyes. And let's have a think. But then, you know, after he's killed Tybalt, he is thinking later in Act 3 about when he hears about being banished. He says heaven is here where Juliet lives, which I think is, you know, evidence again for his romantic nature. And even then when he sort of sees her before he leaves, I can't remember the quote for it, but he makes quite a lot of kind of bold claims about preferring to die if that's what Juliet wants. which sort of fits into that trope of romantic behaviour, but maybe more questionable for us as modern audiences. And then moving, I mean, obviously we don't see much of, if at all, Romeo in Act 4. But then Act 5, Scene 1, he has these prophetic dreams, doesn't he, about seeing her dead, and when he gets the messenger arrives, he immediately talks about how doth my lady. So he's very concerned with her. He says, ironically enough, when he believes her to be dead, I will lie with thee tonight, which he will, but in a kind of dead way. And then maybe we look at towards the end, Act 5-3, the idea of the fact that he kills Paris in a sort of jealous, vengeful kind of way, and that to some romantic, to others tragic and entirely unnecessary sort of end, thus with a kiss I die. You know, that's certainly fits into a highly romantic ideal, doesn't it? Okay, so these are some of the things that I might talk about. What I'm going to just put here is the beginning of my response to this. I always, with the literature essay, try to start with what I call a thesis statement, basically a summary sentence with a list of 3 that kind of sums up your take on the question. So I'm going to say Shakespeare presents Romeo as an impetuous, spontaneous and unequivocally romantic character. That's me summing up the question I'm being asked about him in one sentence. Whilst hyperbolic and often melodramatic, Shakespeare also presents Romeo as having a pure and idealised notion of love. I'm giving myself room here within my essay to have debate. I'm kind of saying, you know, sometimes he's just massively over the top. But yeah, he does fit in with ideas of romance because it is very pure and idealised. What I'm trying to show here is evaluative skill through my sort of use of some of these modifiers. Now you've got different approaches. You can go straight from the extract, or you can go sort of in a chronology, going from beginning, middle, and end. As you can see here, have chosen to think about, even before we meet him, the details we're given about him. I'm not going to read the whole of this to you because you're more than capable, guys, of pausing this and having a read through yourself. But I just want to pull out the things that I have done, which is skills, which will get me lots of marks. Just using terminology in an integrated way. Eponymous just meaning obviously when a character is the play is named after that character. So Macbeth, Romeo and Juliet, the names of these plays are actually named after the characters. So I'm integrating my terminology. I'm actually thinking structurally about the fact that we as audiences haven't yet been introduced to him and things that we're learning about him, focusing carefully on Shakespeare's craft, the juxtaposition of character, and just bringing in context, you know, ideas of, say, toxic masculinity and audience perception. So I and just, you know, this idea of just touching on, I don't need to say in the Elizabethan era audiences thought blah blah blah. So integrated quotes showing links and connections to the rest of the play, establishes him. So a bit like language paper when you think about structure, it's that idea of him being established in a particular way. Right, so moving on, just again, lots of stuff around here about audience reaction, you know, and I'm using lots of methods, dialogue, metaphor, again, all the time focusing on audience reaction and thinking how he contrasts in some ways to other male characters, and just showing lots of knowledge of the play here. Okay, so yeah, sorry, I did a typo somewhere with Rosalind and I can't find it. I called her Rosalind somewhere, never mind. Okay, so this idea of Shakespeare rather setting up Romeo in a particular way in order for audiences to view him in some particular fashion. And then once I've thought about how he was established, then I can move on to the extract. And you can see here my analysis or beginning analysis here of the extract. And I think kind of key takeaways for you should be this idea of audience response, writer purpose. So audience response, you know, that could be effects or how things have been established to us. Writer's purpose, textual examples, and if you can, methods. And obviously we've got those links to the rest of the play. Yes, context, but that can be nicely integrated. So I finished it there because I'm going to move on and make some other connections, perhaps some of those that I mentioned in my plan. I might sort of incorporate those. So you've got options. As I say, you could just start with the extract and do all your stuff with that if that feels easier, and then bring in some other connections, or you can kind of focus on that chronological order going from the beginning, middle, end. What that does allow you, that second method, to do, it gives you that opportunity to think about the way in which a writer develops a character, and that's something that can be quite effective within your essay response. Okay, so I hope seeing this analysis, or my analysis about Romeo and the extent to which he's a romantic character, is useful. Obviously it's not a complete response, but you get an idea, I hope, of the evaluative level. This would be a grade 9 quality response were it completed. Okay, thanks so much for watching. See you next time. Bye.